Hello everyone, my name's the Phawx. I'm the kind of guy that really likes handheld gaming PCs. I've been covering them for so long that sometimes I often assume people know the same amount about them as I do. It dawned on me that I actually needed a discovery with the new Steam Deck. So when the news hit, I started firing a volley of questions at Valve wondering all sorts of stuff. Is it using a MIPI or embedded DisplayPort based display? Is the display native landscape or portrait? Will Valve supply drivers for the touch digitizer and all other ancillary devices on the Steam Deck? Going back and counting, I asked about a dozen different technical and kind of pedestrian questions that I hadn't seen answered yet. But one question that I asked that hadn't been talked about yet has me very excited. All of the hardware is good and all, but if you can't control it to your liking, if you can't tune it, how can you be sure it's as good as it can be? So the question I asked was, is there a way for an individual to specify TDP, or is this supposed to be handled automatically? And I was delighted to hear back the following. The plan is to have built-in software that tries to do exactly what you described. It will be open source, and the interfaces will be well documented. So enthusiasts will always be able to take clocks, TDP, into their own hands if they wish. Now, before we get too far, please carefully look at the word plan here. This is Valve, and Valve has lots of plans. There is such a thing as Valve time. So let's all make sure we carefully arm ourselves with this knowledge before continuing in this video, because you're about to get hit with a metric ton of whiplash. As much as I can try to contain myself, I am super stoked about this information. Please be ready for the absolute hype train, because this is megaton. This news is so crazy large. Let me explain. This video will be divided into a few parts. The first part will be demonstrating why this is important, and the second part will be my 100% complete speculation about what this actually means. So first, why does this matter? The Steam Deck has a 40 watt-hour battery, right? If we want to maximize battery life, we have to ensure that the AMD Vango APU takes as little power as possible. Now, how do we do that? Well, we can hope real hard that when a target frame rate is hit, that puts a cap on the power ceiling. Sometimes this works. I've shown in many videos on my channel how a system will dynamically adapt to power, and as long as it hits the target frame rate, it won't continue to use more power. Great. But what happens if it doesn't? Now let's enter two scenarios. Scenario 1. We artificially constrain TDP and then have the chip automatically try to balance power to both the CPU and GPU. Scenario 2. We not only artificially lower the TDP power ceiling, but we also intervene and manually adjust clock rates. For an example of why that matters, you've been watching a video I released a few days ago on manually adjusting the clock frequency on the GPU for the Aya Neo, which is running AMD's Renoir 4500U APU. Both of these videos show the machine running at 5 watt TDP. However, the video on the right, I manually adjusted the GPU clocks to take precedence, and then the system had to figure out how to power everything else. And when I did that, at the very least, I got a 15% performance increase. In one instance, a 20% performance increase. And in this situation, it was Street Fighter 4 and I was averaging 50 FPS on the left side, and with manually adjusting GPU clocks, it rose to 60 FPS average on the right. Exactly perfect. We used no extra power. In both situations, we had the exact same battery life, but one experience was at 50 FPS and the other was at 60 FPS. This is what we call in the industry having our cake and eating it too. That's what's on offer here. Not only an amazingly great APU that is AMD's Vango, but also that Valve planned on releasing this as built-in software for enthusiasts like us. It's absolute megaton news. Now for the second part of this video, complete and utter speculation. Before I get too far here, Valve time. Let's take this to the next logical step. If individuals are given the tools to explore the APU to perfectly run a game at 30 or 60 FPS, wouldn't it also be really awesome if they could submit that power profile to Steam for every Steam user to automatically download and use that power profile? You know, pretty much exactly how Steam already does this with Steam controller configs. Can you imagine how insane that is? My whole YouTube career is going to need to change if this happens. And I can't wait. Picture it. You're browsing the list of games you own on Steam Deck. You right click and you go to Power Profiles and see a list of different settings. Like 30 FPS medium settings, 4-hour battery life. Click. And that's it. Job done. The handheld PC gaming community has been doing this for years now. And Valve could suddenly come in and make it available to everyone with a few clicks. Absolutely bonkers. Now, one thing you may be saying is, hey folks, what if someone tries to be evil and uploads a profile that pushes your machine to 1000 watts? Won't that break their machine? The answer is 100% no. Two things happen when you set the TDP sky high. Let's understand a few things here. AMD Van Gogh is using a 7nm process node and has 4-core 8-thread Zen 2 CPUs. At the max frequency, which is 3.5 GHz on the Steam Deck, the CPUs alone will use 14 watts of power. This isn't pulling numbers out of my ass, this is actual factual data. What I don't know is how much power the GPU can ultimately take at max frequency. Let's hypothetically say that the GPU can take 10 watts of power. What that means is that the actual TDP ceiling of AMD's Van Gogh is a TDP of 24 watts. So if someone set the TDP to 24 watt and there was a game that had an uncapped frame rate, let's just say at the menu you could burn 24 watts. So now the system is using 24 watts of power. What next? Well, if the heatsink is unable to displace this heat, that means that the APU will start to rise in temperature and eventually it will reach its thermal junction temperature. And then the chip will automatically apply the emergency brakes. All clock frequencies will lower as a result and temps will go down and the chip is saved. So the end result is nothing happens. And this is also if Valve doesn't present a warning if it notices that the TDP is set above 15 watts. It's all net positive if this happens. Anyway, I'm super happy to share all this news with you guys. I personally think it's fantastic. I continue to get excited for the Steam Deck and testing out those RDNA 2 GPUs and a low power APU. As always, guys, thank you for your time, and thanks for watching.